Topic for today is tariffs, and what's very interesting is just anecdotally what we notice about the tariff conversation. Many times we'll have a situation where maybe a colleague or someone who's tangentially involved in our business will approach me or one of my colleagues, and the first question out of their mouth is, how are the tariffs impacting you? How is your business doing relative to tariffs? And that's a very uncommon question. That is not a topic that in my 30 plus years of experience have we really had much dialogue around. Generally speaking, tariffs have been something that sort of levels the playing field. It's an added tax, but it doesn't tend to be something that defines the business climate. And what we're finding is that the business climate is really being defined by the tariffs. And what I mean by that is a lot of the dialogue, a lot of the tariffs that have been imposed, they're a bit unpredictable. They're having a big impact on business planning and on a business's ability to invest, because you're just not certain, if I make an investment today with a 5 or 10 year payback, will those tariffs remain in place that I'm going to be able to realize my payback, or will the markets shift and I'll never recover my investment? So there's really a high level of what I would call paralysis in the marketplace as people are trying to sort out, how do I deploy capital? Where do I make investments so that I can be in the right place at the right time for my OEM customers? So again, as people ask me, how are tariffs impacting us? I guess the best answer is we really don't know. We see a lot of noise, a lot of concern. People talk about moving business, but oftentimes they just don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle the current situation, and most people are standing still. And unfortunately, the global competitors, they keep moving. And so when we're standing still as a country and as a manufacturing base, that's not a good thing. We need to keep investing. We need to keep moving forward and stay in front of where the global business is moving. Last Thursday, I think it was August 29th, there was a decision came down from an appellate court that said many of the tariffs that have been enacted thus far were not done in a legal fashion. They were not done through Congress. Congress has the authority to tax, and because it did not go through Congress and it was an executive order, there's a lot of questions about what will happen with tariffs, what will happen with the tariffs that have already been collected, what will be the tax structure going forward. And so, unfortunately, I think it's more uncertainty and more paralysis. One other trend that tariffs are supposed to help with is relative to onshoring, or what many refer to as reshoring. I think it's a very noble endeavor. There's a lot of positives to reshoring from the standpoint of, much shorter supply chains mean products can be built closer to the customer, can be delivered faster to the customer. There's lots of technologies around additive manufacturing or around the ways that tools are built today that can be built much faster maybe than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So I think there's a lot of positive that comes out of reshoring. Some of the supply chain issues that we saw during COVID were related to really long supply chains, and supply chains that were dependent on, let's say, low cost energy. And so if you were in a part of the world that has really low cost energy, you probably attracted a lot of energy intensive industries because you could do it more cost effectively. And so other parts of the world have to figure out, how do we become more, not just energy independent, but more cost effective in producing energy? And then you will be able to level out that global supply chain, and you will be able to make things closer to home. So that's kind of one example of what some industries are trying to figure out. I think one of the challenges with onshoring is, again, the marketplace is changing very, very rapidly. You're looking at things like artificial intelligence and high levels of automation being introduced into the factory. So even if we were to reshore many of what were the traditional jobs that have gone overseas, when we do reshore those jobs, they're going to be done in a factory that's highly automated, and right or wrong, you're not going to create the level of jobs that we may have thought of in past years. So again, I think making things at home is super important. It's super important that we have a vibrant manufacturing industry. But again, you've got to pick a tariff level that is sustainable and that promotes the right activities and doesn't become so punitive that you reset the global order and have folks around the world looking for new partners and looking for new ways to do things that then ends up excluding the US and US manufacturing. In trying to think through how reshoring efforts might be impacting domestic customers and looking at whether it's having positive impacts to lead times, positive impacts to cost, those types of things. Again, I think the jury is still out. It's really too soon to tell. I'm often asked which industries are most actively reshoring products and why. If I had to say, the focus tends to be on where is a final product consumed. And so many times people want to shorten that supply chain. They want to build as close to their customer as they can. So if you look at, say, the data center space, a lot of that big data center equipment is being built here in North America that's going to be deployed here in North America. If you look at automotive, again, you're going to see that there's a lot of folks trying to build vehicles within the region, not necessarily here in the US, it could be in Mexico, it could be in Canada, but kind of within the region of where those vehicles are going to be consumed. And so, again, there's a very complicated supply chain that supports all of that vehicle assembly that needs to be factored in and considered because, again, you have energy intensive industries where maybe a foundry product should come from a low-cost region, but maybe something that's injection molded could come from a neighboring facility. So oftentimes it's based around what are your inputs. So if you have something that's very labor intensive, again, you're going to want to be focused on a low-cost region from a labor perspective. If you have something that's energy intensive, you're going to want to be focused on what market has cost-effective energy. And if it is a very large form factor, maybe in low volume, you're going to want to produce that close to where that consumption site is. So I think one way that Lupton Associates can help our customers and our manufacturers sort of think through the tariff challenge is just that we've been in business for 55 years. We work with hundreds of OEMs and dozens of manufacturers that really are touching a lot of different industries. And so we can bring with us the experience from all of those different customers and be able to talk intelligently about, here's how some others might be mitigating the tariff impact, or here's some other things to think about that maybe a competitor is doing, or maybe some other, region of the world might be doing, which could be a place to invest or to source products from.